Hey, what's up? It's Nathan. This is going to be the first installment in a series designed more for novices, trying to explain what competitive policy debate is. Hopefully, if you are not a novice, you're still able to gain something out of this video. But this is mainly going to be trying to introduce novices to the idea of what debate is. So before I spend a bunch of time explaining to you what debate is, I want to explain to you a little bit about why you should care about debate. So that's going to be the first slide of this lecture. So I think a major issue with the educational system is that people will not realize why things are important to learn until they've already fallen behind. The issue is like people will be like, I don't get how this is practical to my life or why it's something that I need to know. And so they won't pay attention. They'll fall behind. And by the time they realize I would have benefited from learning this, it's too late. So I want to start before we get into debate, asking a whole lot out of you, a little bit of an explanation from me as an advocate for debate as to why it deserves your time. So I recently graduated from college. And I was very fortunate. I think I spent less than like $100 out of pocket. I have no student loans, and I had a lot of excellent opportunities, and that was all because of debate. I like to think that I'm a better person, not only through my travel, but through the skills and abilities that I've gained through debate. It's one of those things. It's fundamentally changed my life, and if you are in a class or in a club for debate, sitting here listening to me talk about this, like why you should care about debate segment, you are so unbelievably close to a wealth of knowledge that will fundamentally change your life and set you up probably for the rest of it. And so I really, really hope that you're able to stick this out at least till your first couple tournaments, because we're going to talk about a lot of things in these upcoming lectures and videos, and they might not make a whole lot of sense. But like once you go and experience debate, I promise you'll love it. The community is really awesome. The sense of community is just absolutely extraordinary, and I've met some of the best people I know through this activity. But yeah, so I really think you should give debate a shot. But let's go ahead and get into like what debate is. So when we think about debate, a lot of people will think about like personal arguments and like discussions that are like argumentative with people that they've had in their life. But competitive debate's very different than that. Whilst you're making arguments, it's an activity that's competitive by design. So rather than it being something where you just argue with no real structure or organization, in debate, there are two teams and they take turns speaking with like equal speech times, the order of which are a little bit different depending on what side you're on. But ultimately, you're going to have the same amount of speech time, the same amount of time to like ask and answer questions and all that stuff. And so it's very formal in comparison to those style of debates. But it will make you better at those style of debates for sure, through your bettering of our argumentative logic and reasoning. But yeah, so the goal of debate for both sides is to debate about the resolution, which is a statement that the affirmative team is going to try to prove is true, the affirmative team being often referred to as the AF, and the negative team is going to try to prove why the affirmative's attempts to prove the resolution are false. And so you might be asking, like, why isn't the negative's attempt to prove just like the resolution is false generally? And that's a little bit complicated. So let's go ahead and get into the resolution for the 2025-2026 school year, which is resolved. The United States federal government should significantly increase its exploration and or development of the Arctic. Now, if you're watching this in the future and that's not the topic anymore, don't get scared. I think this is one of the only times we're going to be talking about it. It's not super important, but this is the resolution that at least the folks watching this in 2025, 2026 will be debating. So it might seem a little bit complicated at first, but realistically, it's quite simple. There's only a few words that actually matter. The United States federal government should is going to be in nearly, if not all, resolutions you're ever going to debate. And then it's going to be followed with a significantly or substantially, and then increase or decrease. And then these are the words that are really going to matter. So it's the United States government is going to increase by a large amount exploration and or development of the Arctic. Like, this is the core of what the topic is actually going to be about, at least for this year. And so you might be asking yourself, like, that's really vague. Am I just supposed to defend why exploration and development or development is just generally good in the Arctic? But that's not actually how it works. So this is policy debate, which, unlike other formats of debate, means that the affirmative team is almost always going to be defending a policy or a plan. And a plan is where the affirmative team decides what action the United States federal government is going to do under this topic. So they say, rather than the United States federal government increasing like all exploration, we say that they should significantly increase this specific type of exploration, and then they'll give reasons why that particular type of exploration is good, and that'll be their AF plan. So they've effectively, the term we're using here is parameterized the resolution, or they've created parameters by which they defend the resolution, which means the negative's job is to now attack why that's not a reason why the resolution's true. That usually happens through the word should. So the should obviously means that, like, we should do something, that it would be a good thing to do. And so the negative is going to make a bunch of arguments why, if the AF plan says we should increase this type of exploration, why we shouldn't, the negative will make arguments why we shouldn't increase that type of exploration. And if they're able to do so, then even if all of the other types of exploration other than the plan and all types of development are good, then they have stopped the affirmative team from proving the resolution true, because they decided that they were just going to defend this one type of exploration. And so that's why the negative's job isn't just like the AF says yes to the resolution, neg says no, because on the negative, you don't have to say no to a lot of things. So if the people that you end up debating against only read one or two affirmatives, there's going to be a lot of this topic that you never end up really debating. And so don't get super overwhelmed by the seeming size of this topic, because it's actually not as big as you would originally anticipate. So what do arguments look like in debate? Arguments are always going to fundamentally tie back to this resolution and whether or not the United States federal government should significantly increase its exploration and or development of the Arctic, or whatever topic you're debating on. That's going to be the ultimate goal that the affirmative is trying to prove the resolution true, because they say, well, here's an instance in which that's good. And we're going to say that that's a reason why the resolution is true, because we have this topical action that proves that that's the case. And so whenever you get into more advanced debate, you're not going to have to do a lot of the nitty-gritty work where you're explaining why all of the arguments you make connect back to the resolution. But generally speaking, that's always going to be what they do, regardless of whether or not you have to like explicitly say that in front of some judges or not. So just approach debate with that mindset in mind, that the affirmative team has the goal of trying to prove the resolution is true through their topical action, and the negative is disagreeing with that topical action. So debate is a competitive activity, and most competitive activities have rules, but debate is a little bit unique in that regard, in that not many things in debate are actually rules, or at least even the few things that are rules, according to some organizations that create rules for debate, like at a state or a national level, aren't really enforced by a lot of judges. So when we talk about things in debate in this video, as well as videos going forward, remember that a lot of the things we're going to be talking about are just community norms, or rather things that members of the debate community have agreed are like generally good, rather than things that are like, if you don't do this, you are incorrect. So be prepared One, both to think about things in the perspective of why is this good for debate, or why is this a good practice, rather than just learning things from the perspective of this is how things are. So keep that in mind, as well as be prepared, because as you advance through debate, you will experience people that developed and learned debate in a different environment than you did, and they're going to disagree on how debate functions. And so it's really important when you're starting to learn debate that you don't just learn how things are in your local circuit, but rather learn how things are and why they are that way. So like whenever we learn about here's a specific type of here's a specific way that people debate, think about why debating like that is good for the activity. And so you don't have to get too in depth in that right now. This is a novice lecture, so I don't want to get too down that rabbit hole, but just something to keep in mind. Think about things a little bit more critically rather than just trying to memorize things, because a lot of novices will start off really fast in debate and they'll memorize a lot of things, but they won't actually learn those things. It's like they'll be able to name to you all the different things in debate that are like terminology, but they aren't able to explain to you like how those terminologies like were originally formed in debate, like why this argument was invented by someone at some point in time, like what was the original justification behind it. And so just try to do that going forward, kind of loosely, because you still do want to learn all this stuff, but it's really important to learn the why, not just the what. So earlier, we talked about speech times in debate. This is one of the few things that not a lot of people will ever really argue with you about. There are some justifications that you might see in some really advanced formats of debate that you're not going to have to worry about for a long period of time, where people will say that they should get more speech time for X, Y, and Z reason. But generally speaking, speech times are not something you're ever going to really have to worry about arguing or having to defend. But these are the speeches in debate. Depending on what organization you debate for, like your state or your local organization or the national tournament you're going to, might have variations of these time constraints. But typically speaking, like it's always going to be like these constructives are all going to be the same, and these rebuttals are all going to be the same amount of time. And this is like the most standard of time that you'll see across the different like organizational forms of debate. So all the different speeches have 3-letter abbreviations, and you can take a second to like read through these, and each of these are probably going to get their own video in the future. But this is just like the general goal of that speech. But the abbreviations are really simple if we just break them down. So each speech starts with either a 1 or a 2. And whenever you're in a debate round, you're either going to be the 1 or you're going to be the 2. And so you're going to give both of the 1 speeches or both of the 2 speeches for your team. And so if you're the 1, then you're going to give the 1A C and the 1A R. And then if you're the 2N, you're going to give the 2N C and the 2N R. So the second one obviously stands for affirmative or negative, and the final one stands for constructive or rebuttal. So each speaker is going to give 1 constructive speech and 1 rebuttal speech, so an 8-minute speech and a 5-minute speech per the 2 individuals on a team. So what is a constructive speech? So a constructive speech is like they're the first 4 speeches in the debate, and they're where the debate starts to like form. It's where you build up your arguments and you make new arguments to build up your case. Whilst you do respond in constructive speeches, so like this 2AC speech is largely responsive to the 1NC, but generally speaking, these are the points in which you're allowed to make new arguments. And so this is where most of your case is going to be developed. But then the contrary is the rebuttal speeches, where there's not going to be new arguments, but we'll get into that after we do cross-examination. So In between each of these aren't colored because they're just like general periods. They don't belong to either team technically. It's cross-examination. It's where one team will ask questions to another team, or one debater will ask questions to another debater. And that's open versus closed cross-examination, which we'll probably get into when we talk about like the actual procedures of debate. But generally speaking, all you need to know right now is that you ask questions to the team that just gave the speech. So cross-examination speeches are usually, or cross-examination periods are usually 3 minutes. Your job is to ask questions that set up your future speeches. You don't really want to give them opportunities to use your cross-examination time as speech time, but ultimately, as you're getting into debate, you just want to sound confident and clear and make your opponent seem less knowledgeable about their case. But ultimately, your end goal should be to ask questions that offensively set up the strategy that you're going to execute in your next speech. But we'll obviously get more into that as we get out of the introduction to debate period. We can skip that for now. On to rebuttal speeches. So rebuttal speeches, on the other hand, are the last 4 speeches of the debate. We're getting towards the end of the debate, so you're generally not going to see new arguments. Some people will make new arguments, but it's largely agreed upon by people that making new arguments in the rebuttals is probably bad because those new arguments don't really have time to develop into anything meaningful. And so it's better off just having your new arguments earlier on in the debate so they have time to actually function. The end goal of a rebuttal speech is to like break down the debate rather than the debate being massive and about a bunch of different microscopic issues. You want to break the debate down to here's why we're going to win the debate. And that's the ultimate goal for all the rebuttal speeches. Next is on like how we keep track of arguments in debate, because this is another thing that I think we need to have on our mind while we're getting into what debate is. Before we can get on to, this was in a different order when I originally made this. So the point of this slide is to talk about what is called the flow. So whenever you're keeping track of arguments in debate, there's a lot of speech time. And so if you're trying to like hear the 1AC and get ready for the 1NC and then eventually the 1NR, by the time the 1NRs happened, you've had, including your speech, 16 and then 24 minutes of debate time, which is a lot. And so if your goal is to put the 1AC just into memory, then you're going to set yourself up for failure. And so that's why we do something called flowing in debate, which is where when people say things, we jot down what they say, and then we keep track of our response to what they said, and then their response to our response, and vice versa. And so as long as an argument is existent in the debate, it should be flowed. Obviously, there's going to get to a point where arguments are like not important anymore, and so we can stop flowing them. But as long as they're an argument that's being continued in the debate, we should have them on our flow, and we should keep track of the different arguments that they say. And so we'll get into how to flow and what flowing looks like and the different ways you can flow in later lectures. Just keep that in mind, that that's something that you're going to need to be ready to start working on and improving on as you get into debate, because the better you get at this and the faster it makes sense to you and the more practice you get, the quicker debate will make sense for you. So next is what happens when we don't keep track of arguments in debate. So there's 2 options. So when an argument is not continued in the debate, it's either dropped or it's kicked. So a dropped argument is when a team usually accidentally doesn't respond to something. So say we made this argument, they said this, and then we responded to it, but then they didn't have a response to our response. And so they've now dropped this argument. And so whatever we said here is going to be considered true for the purpose of the debate. So even if it's not true, like even if this statement is just factually incorrect, they didn't respond to it. Like we gave a good reason why this is true. And even though it's not, like even though we were wrong about this, like they didn't respond to why we were wrong. And we gave a good reason as to why we are correct, regardless of whether or not that's true or not. And so whenever you drop an argument debate, that can be really bad for you if them winning that argument and proving that that argument's true stops you from winning the debate. So it's really important that we keep track of things on our flow and have a very good and rigorous flow so that we aren't dropping arguments that cause us to lose debates. And the other option is you can kick arguments. And kicked arguments are the only real difference is not that it isn't a dropped argument, but it was a dropped argument on purpose. So when we deliberately choose to not continue a debate, it's because we think that we're going to still win the debate, even if we don't respond to this. And if we respond to this, it's not going to meaningfully improve our chances of winning the debate. And if anything, it's going to waste time. And so you'll see debaters as the debate gets on, if they don't think that your arguments are going to bite them, if they don't respond to them, then they're going to get away with dumping a lot more of their time, because you do have limited time in debate, on the arguments that they think will win them the debate, rather than responding to things that it's like if they didn't respond to this, nothing would be different, because the best case scenario for you, if they don't respond to this argument, is you aren't really able to leverage it as a reason why they lose, because you can't connect it back to that fundamental issue of proving the resolution. Yeah, so it's important to note that the only difference between a kicked argument and a dropped argument is the name. So if an argument's kicked, it's still considered true. And so you want to make sure that when you are kicking arguments, which you should be, because it's very strategic in debate, that you're not kicking things that are going to cause you to lose the debate. And that'll be something that we talk about once again in a future lecture where we get more in depth on these individual issues. Next is going to be extending. And I think this is one of the last things we're going to be covering, at least in this introduction to debate, because I'm hoping to just spread out a lot of different things for you to think about for us to go in more depth later. But extension is when you continue an argument in a debate. So say in the 1AC, got to scroll pretty far, you read your affirmative case. The 2AC is going to extend the 1AC. And what that means is you're going to restate and reiterate the warrants of your claims. So even if they don't respond to the argument, like if they don't have an argument against your stuff, you're still going to be like, continue this argument on the debate to like iterate that we still care about this. The reason why you don't want to forget to extend your stuff, and a lot of bad debaters will forget to extend their stuff, is because if you don't extend anything, then you're leaving what the judge continues in the debate up to the judge themselves. And a lot of judges are not going to want to intervene for you and do work to prove why you should win the debate that you didn't do. And so ultimately, like, if you have a piece of evidence in your 1AC, we'll go to the top just to like visualize this. You have a piece of evidence in your 1AC. You don't extend it in your 2AC. You don't extend it in your 1AR. But that evidence responds to a fundamental argument that they're making in their 2NR as to why they should win the debate. And then in the 2AR, you're like, oh, wait. Remember this piece of evidence we read 888555333, whatever that adds up to, minutes ago? Like, we read that evidence. We should actually win the debate because this is responsive to the thing they said. that feels really lazy. Like it feels very, very cheap to give the affirmative an out to win the debate that they like technically did have in the debate, but like they totally forgot about it. Like you snuck this through. Sorry, you snuck this through, and I realistically should not give this to you. But how do I resolve that as a judge? Well, the way you resolve that as a judge is by forcing people to extend their stuff. If you want to keep that piece of evidence that you read in the 1AC that responds to this argument, you gotta keep it. And same thing with the 1NC. Like the 1NC can't do the same thing where it's like the 1AR has some creative twist that they make to respond to these two speeches, and the 2NR is like, oh wait, no, we had a piece of evidence in the 1NC that responds to that they didn't extend, because then the 1AR didn't have a chance to respond to that because they didn't know that was an argument that you were continuing in this debate. So that's why you extend. Hopefully that made sense. We're going to get more into why you extend when we talk about, there's probably going to be a whole lecture about flowing and the flow, because it's incredibly important. But yeah, so the only way to stop that judge intervention is to have things be extended. And so you've got to make sure that you extend your stuff. It's not good enough to make the argument at some point in the debate. You have to continue making it and continue advocating for it, or else it's kind of just lazy. And judges are not going to want to reward that. But yeah, so ultimately, the point that I've been trying to make in this is debate is very fun, and it's fun because it is what you make of it. You're going to continue to learn debate. And as I've probably indicated through just this lecture alone, there's so many different things that you can learn just as a novice. And there's even things that like I'm still learning about debate, and that people that have been in debate for a lot longer than me are learning, because it's constantly innovating, and there's a ton of things that you're always going to be able to learn. And so I hope that I didn't confuse you too much. I wanted to try to like open up all of the boxes that I possibly could, so you had like an idea generally of what you were getting into, and hopefully some of the stuff sounded interesting. And if anything didn't sound interesting, whenever we get to the individual lectures, hopefully I'm able to explain it in a way that does make sense. So stay tuned for more lectures in this series where I'm going to be going over the different things I think you need to learn about debate. But yeah, thank you so much. Check out the playlists on this channel for more educational debate content, not just for novices, but for all different levels of debate. If you have any questions, email my email and reach out, and hopefully I'll be able to reach out to you and answer any of those questions or concerns that you have. But yeah, thank you so much. And the next lecture for at least the novice section of this series of debate educational videos is probably going to be on logic and argumentation. So we'll take a break from the niche that is policy debate and all the different terminologies and lingos you need to learn, and just like have a conversation about logic and argumentation that will hopefully make a lot of those things in the future make more sense. But hopefully this was a good introduction. Once again, thank you, and tune in to the next episode.